This is episode 81 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico podcast. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. This and every week we'll be talking to you about public policy issues facing New Mexico. This week I am pleased to be joined by Mark Mathis of the Clear Energy Alliance. That's clearenergyalliance.com. And Mark, welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico.
Thank you. Good to talk to you, Paul.
Yeah, well, known each other for a while here, and I knew that you had left the state of New Mexico, but let's talk a little bit about who Mark Mathis is, because you have been at one time and for quite a while a resident of the land of enchantment, but not anymore. And tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into public policy, etc.
Well, I've lived most of my life in New Mexico. I grew up there on the west side. I went to Siebel High School, University of New Mexico, and got a degree in broadcast journalism. And then I worked at several TV stations around the country. Started out at KOB TV as a news reporter, and then I worked in Central California and Charleston, South Carolina as a sportscaster, and in Las Vegas, Nevada as a news anchor. And then I came back to New Mexico and worked at Channel 7 as a news reporter and fill-in anchor. I got tired of that and started my own media relations company. I wrote a book on media, which was pretty helpful in moving me into the public sphere. And from then have done many things. I've got pulled into making documentary films, did a documentary film with Ben Stein, and which then kind of gave me the documentary film bug. So I went on and made two films on energy, one called Spoiled, one called Fractured. Spoiled was all about the idea that we're not addicted to oil, we're spoiled by it. And the Fractured, which is that most of the words and phrases we use when we talk about energy are wrong and deceptive. And from there, I wound up getting into making internet videos on energy topics.
And there are a number.
That's the short story on Mark Mathis.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of great videos available at the Clear Energy Alliance's website. But before we get into some of the issues and what attracted you to energy in the first place, I do want to talk about your book, which I know Wally, the producer, who's done his fair share of media, as well as myself, we both are huge fans of the book Feeding the Media Beast, which you authored. And considering that probably 95 to 99% of the folks listening to this podcast are probably conservative free marketers in some way, shape, or form, it would behoove them to all get a copy of Feeding the Media Beast, read it, and figure out how they can best engage with the media. But talk briefly about kind of the theme and the approach you have with regard to the media.
Well, after working for nearly a decade in the news business, I got out and I started a media relations company and started consulting around the state of New Mexico. And in doing so, I quickly found out that there was a disconnect, that people in government, in business, they really didn't know how to engage with the news media. And so I started making a pretty comfortable living just helping people do that. And along the way, I was like, I'm this sort of remaking the wheel every day just was not appealing to me. And as I started spending more and more time helping people engage, I started doing what I always do because I am just an analyst at heart. I started looking for patterns. And as I started identifying these patterns, I started figuring out a way that I could instruct people on, look, here's how you should go about engaging the news media. So then I transitioned to becoming a media trainer. And when I first started doing it, I wasn't doing it very well. I would give a training session, people would be excited, and I thought, okay, I'm doing good work here. And then I would run into people months later and say and ask them, what have you put into play? How have you used this to your advantage? And I found out that really, although people enjoyed the seminars, they weren't putting it into play. So I went back and sort of said, okay, I got to rethink this whole thing. And what I did was I developed a simple rule-based system for how to engage the media that, based on my reading, I went out and read as many books as I could on media and media relations and engaging the media. And what I discovered was all the books out there failed for the same reason, which is they just wanted to, they were doing what I was doing in my seminars, which is here's a bunch of do's and don'ts and tips and strategies. And if you do these things, then you're going to be successful. But that doesn't work because people can't keep that material in their heads. And so I had to figure out a way around that. And I developed this system, 12 rules based on 4 categories. And once you learn the rule, and it's a single name of each rule, then you know what that means, and that then informs you on what to look for and how to do things. So coming up with that rule-based system was really a breakthrough. And so I started teaching that in seminars, and then I had a guy tell me at one of my seminars, like, you're blowing it here because this should be a book. And that started me thinking, okay, yeah, I got to write a book. So I wrote it, and it was doing really well. And then I was fortunate using my own rules, and we got a big spread in the Wall Street Journal. And from there, it really took off.
Wow. Well, I didn't know about the Wall Street Journal, but that only makes sense. And kind of what I took from the book itself is that basically, the media is not necessarily biased against you. They may be individually biased against you as a conservative, but their primary bias is that they're dealing with too many issues that they know too little about and don't have enough time to figure it all out. And so you can, as a conservative, come in with your facts and information presented in an interesting way and leverage the media very effectively. And I think the Rio Grande Foundation has done that in its time, that I've been working with us here in New Mexico. But any other brief thoughts on that? Because I actually have a specific case that I want to run by you that we just got done with on energy that's also relating to the media. But do you have any last thoughts on the book and how you summarize it?
Well, I think you actually hit on what you hit on really was chapter 1, which was establishing this is who you're dealing with, and your summation there was good. That these people are overwhelmed, they're undereducated on all these subjects, and they need your help. They need you to do the heavy lifting, and which speaks to out of the 12 rules that are there, probably the most powerful rule is called the rule of easy. And that is that you make it as easy as possible for the news media to cover your subject. So as much of the heavy lifting as you can do, the greater your chances are of engaging the news media. And it works both ways, both on the positive side of I'm trying to attract media attention, and also on the other side, which is I've got attention that I don't want, and how do I deal with that? But you've got to make it easy for them, do the heavy lifting, and I know the Rio Grande Foundation has done a good job of that, of doing that heavy lifting, so that when you present something to the news media, it's just easy for them. It's an easy hit because they've got way too much going on, not enough expertise, and they need help.
So on that note, something that frustrated me out of this legislative session that just passed is the Energy Transition Act. It dealt with shutting down the San Juan generating station in northwestern New Mexico, going to a 50% renewable standard on electricity generation in New Mexico. And Mark, I don't know if it's the politics of the state moving the media in this direction, or if the complexity of the issue is just too much for these reporters. But man, I'm pretty good about trying to give the media a benefit of the doubt, partially because I've read your book and understand what they're going through. But I really have been disappointed in the media's coverage of this particular issue. They have not mentioned the potential for higher costs in electricity generation and people's electric bills. Study after study shows that renewable mandates increase electricity costs. So any thoughts on that kind of issue and just dealing with it? Because and I know energy is your forte, but where, and more broadly speaking, how do you get these issues that are very complicated to be palatable for media outlets?
Yeah, so what we do in the book is we take the issue and we say, okay, we're going to run it through what I call the seducers: difference, emotion, simplicity. Your news item must be different. It must have an emotive quality. You've always got to search for and find the emotive quality, and that's the difficult part when you're covering energy issues, is that the emotive side is not easy to shape. So you just have to. That's where the really hard work is done, and then simplicity is you've got to take the complexity, do everything you can to reduce the complexity so that the person, the news reporter, the news organization can quickly grasp it and understand that they can convey it to a public. So one of the things that I always do in these situations, and this is what we do with our videos, is you've got to figure out, okay, visually, how can I demonstrate this? And so right off the top is, if you can show a number of studies and you can actually show it graphically. Look, here's what has happened. Here's what studies show. You can use a given state or even nation and say, here's what's happened over time in Germany, for example. Germany has a program called Energy Windy. They're out in front of us trying to transition to industrial wind and solar power, and they are running into a wall. South Australia is in much the same boat, where the costs are far outrunning what was projected, and they're destabilizing their grid, and they're heading toward disaster. And so, from a rate standpoint, because that's what people care about, it's certainly what they should care about, is what's this going to cost me money? And so plotting that out on a graph, make it a visual representation, so the kind of thing that can be printed with your permission, of course, which you would give in a newspaper or a magazine, or could be duplicated and used in broadcast. And then finding, somebody, folks who would be willing to speak on the issue, to say, you know what, I don't want this. We don't want this. Combining forces, going to the Chamber of Commerce, for example, and presenting, creating an event. This is what's called the rule of invention in the book. And creating an event where you put some powerful players together, maybe the Rio Grande Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, other folks that you can put together to say, this is not good. We don't like this, and we don't like it for these reasons, and if they're valid, this is something that's going to hurt people. And it's not going to be good for the state. It's not going to be good for our economy. We are against it. And here is the evidence, and you make that evidence as clear and easy to understand as possible. And on the emotive side, look, you see people do this all the time. The presidents do this all the time. They hold a State of the Union speech, and they bring in, say, a veteran who lost, a limb or two in Afghanistan or Iraq. These are emotional appeals. And that draws, the media knows that draws eyeballs, that will get their attention. So you've got to find that in your story.
Well, those are very good tips and advice, and we'll certainly try to do better next time. It was a frustrating experience dealing with the media on this particular issue, but you're now
the main one, Paul. That on this one here, look, your frustration is being felt across the country, because this stuff is extremely complicated, and the media cannot, as you know from the book, the media cannot handle complexity. So in this case, really working, I mean, those three rules, difference, emotion, simplicity, making this thing as simple as possible is really the key. And it is a daunting task. I encounter it every time. I mean, I encountered it with my movies, and I encounter every time I do a video, which I try to keep to 4 minutes long. These are typically complex subjects, and I try to reduce them down to something that is engaging and easy to understand. And it is not easy. It's a difficult thing to do.
No doubt about it. And you've gotten involved in energy, and that is certainly one of the more complicated areas to engage in with the media, because it's so easy to just say, oh, we're going to be 100% green, or we're going to be, zero emissions, or whatever it might be. The talking points are clear, but to explain, the process of fracking or some of these other issues that you try to explain in your movies and videos, it gets very difficult. Is that why you chose this particular area to play in, or what attracted you to energy
Yes.
issues in the first place?
Well, the energy issues go all the way back to the book. I had written some information in some passages that I had in the book related to energy, and I had an oil and gas man in Artesia read my book, a gentleman named Frank Yates. You've heard Yates Petroleum.
Yep.
Frank had read my book and said, the oil and gas industry in New Mexico is just terrible at trying to get the media to understand what it is that they do. We need some help from the kind of stuff that this guy offers in his book. And so they had me make a presentation to their group. They liked the whole idea of simplifying things, and their whole desire was just simply, look, we just want the people of New Mexico to understand better what it is that we do. And if they just understand that and how important this stuff is to their lives, and it's not 100% wonderful, there are downsides, but there are downsides to absolutely everything. So these guys felt like, look, warts and all, if people just have a greater understanding of what we do for them in their lives, they're warts and all, they're gonna come out way ahead. So I started consulting with the Independent Petroleum Association of New Mexico. That's where I started. Like, okay, with any client, I would have to go, do a bunch of in-depth reading on their industry, and I've done work across the board in law enforcement and in hospitals, energy, and so in doing that research, that's where it happened. I was like, wait a minute, a whole lot of things that I thought I knew were simply not true. And there was so much that I didn't even have a clue about. And so I thought, look, I'm a guy, I'm a person with a college degree, and I've been a news reporter all over the country, and I'm a curious person. I'm an analyst at heart, and I didn't know these things. How are we expecting, you're just the average person just getting through their day to understand this stuff? And that's what sort of got me engaged. I'm always the kind of person who likes to say, look, people, they think of the world in one way, and it's just always been part of me to look at things that we're being told the world is this way, and I then look at it and say, whoa, wait a minute, I'm looking at it and I see the world really isn't that way. The world is this way, and let me explain why. It's just something I like to do. And so the energy and environment is filled with those sorts of things where the general public is completely misinformed, and a lot of times it's due to a disinformation campaign by people who have a vested interest in the matter.
No doubt about it. And before we get into some of the specific videos you've made, I've been remiss in not asking you, being in newsrooms here in New Mexico and across the country, obviously you're a conservative guy. Maybe you had some educational experiences along the way, including on energy, but did you feel out of place in these newsrooms? Was it clear that people just took on a liberal viewpoint most times? Kind of describe that whole vibe that you got in a newsroom? Granted, being, maybe a decade or so ago, so maybe it's a little different today.
Yeah, actually, crazy enough, let me see, it's 25 years ago. As
Oh,
crazy as that
goodness.
is, it's hard to say.
Black and white
But
television.
yeah, no,
Just
not
kidding.
quite that bad, but a long time ago. Yeah, I left Channel 7 in 1994. But when I first got into television news, I was naive, I was apolitical. I didn't really understand, and the news business was very different back then. But when I first got into TV, man, I loved it. And I worked with people who they were, as far as I could see as a young person getting into the business, they wanted to do everything they could to put forth an accurate story, one that presented as many sides of what was going on as is possible. They hated to get things wrong. And one of the first sort of news giants that I worked with was Dick Niffing. And man, I was in fear of that guy the entire time I was at KOB. I didn't want to get anything wrong because, man, if you got something wrong, he was gonna let you know. I mean, he wasn't a hard guy or anything. You just didn't want to disappoint him. And and then there was a learning process. I then went to California and I worked there for a while. And I really didn't even at that time know who I was, politically, philosophically. I sort of just fell into that environment. But I think the environment back then was very much of, hey, let's do a good job here. Let's get it right. And if somebody's telling us something that really that kind of rubs us the wrong way, it hits our bias in a way we don't like, then you just have to get past that and tell their side. That's your job. And as I got to where I was getting close to leaving the business, when I was at Channel 7, I started noticing more of the sort of more at that time what I thought was unconscious bias, sort of a leftward tilt that the people who worked in that environment didn't even realize that they had a left tilt. But I would tell you that in the years since then, it has turned into a full-blown tilt is not even the right word, very left presentation of the world as we see it today, and they are shockingly unapologetic about their bias. They've given up all pretense. So it's degraded over the years in a way that is really, if I would to go back to the young reporter days at KOB back in the mid '80s, I would have been absolutely stunned at how far it's gone into becoming something that really is, in my view, a danger to the republic.
Right. And your videos now are available at clearenergyalliance.com/videos, but you can go to the website and get to them as well. And you have, sorry.
A better, probably, I'm sorry, Paul, but a better, that's fine to go to our website and everything, but we like people to go to our YouTube channel as
and
well.
Subscribe, right?
Yeah, go to our YouTube channel, subscribe, but you'll see those videos. It's the way they're laid out. The YouTube does it pretty well. Subscribing's easy, and then you just every time we come out with a new video, which is roughly once every week to 10 days, then they'll get a notification.
And I count about 45 videos currently, at least on your website. I don't know if there's any more floating around out there, but that's a good amount of videos for people to go back and watch. They're all relatively short, 4 to 5 minutes on each of these videos?
Yeah, we have a I don't know, probably only 2 or 3 that reached the 5-minute mark, and those mostly happened when we first started getting going, and we were trying to establish sort of how long they thought they should go, and I decided a while back that really we got to do everything we can to stick to 4 minutes. And then we have some, and they're labeled with a banner in the right-hand corner that say CEA short, and those we try to keep to around 2 minutes.
Now you have a whole series, though, and judging from the video content here and just counting up what topics are covered, clearly the Green New Deal is at the top of your agenda, the radar screen, if you will. More images of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on your website than maybe on her own website. You have quite extensive coverage of her, cartoon form, I might add, which is an interesting dynamic as well. So, you've got 6 videos on the Green New Deal. What specifically about the Green New Deal do you see as the biggest problems that are going to, or is it just the whole thing as a entire policy prescription? But what do you see as an issue with the Green New Deal?
Well, I would quote our third of our 6 videos called G&D Impossible. And near the top of that video, I say something to the effect of, like, the most difficult thing in trying to describe how stupid this is the size of the stupid. This thing has layers of ridiculousness, one on top of another, and it stacks unbelievably high. I mean, the basic issue is that this thing is not about energy. It's not about climate change. It's about socialism. It's about power. When you have politicians telling you, don't worry about money, they admit this is going to cost trillions. They don't even know. It's one of the laughable things that I've seen since she came out with this manifesto is that you've got different varying groups that are coming in saying, oh, it's going to cost X number of $1 trillion. They have no idea what this thing could potentially cost. And and when I say cost, I mean in simply trying to do it, because there is no way to do it. And not only that, you would destroy the country if you even came halfway to doing it. When most of this so-called Green New Deal is really about socialist agenda items, Medicare for all, a free money, a substantially higher minimum wage, all the things that a leftist wants are thrown into this pot. And only a small part of it is actually about energy. And let me tell you, not only does Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez know absolutely nothing about energy or climate change, none of the big leaders on the political scene, they don't know anything either, or they know very little. They don't understand basics, like you can't store electricity. You got to use it on demand when it's created, and that the wind, the way that the intermittent nature of wind means that you're going to have to keep in place electricity generating sources that are going to be able to kick in when the wind dies down and when the sun isn't shining. These are just real basic concepts, and the complexity and the difficulty of working through all of the challenges, it goes far, far deeper than that. And none of these people on the political scene have a clue about this, and you can see it in the ridiculous things that they say when they talk about it. And the same thing goes for climate change, which is our Earth's climate is. There is nothing on that we know of that's more complex, except the human brain, than our climate system. And we're being told, oh no, it's a trace gas in the atmosphere that is driving what we're being told is some dramatic shift in climate, which, by the way, is not something we have observed. That's something that's been hyped. And so just the complexity level is incredible. And this is coming, from somebody who spent 15 years studying and analyzing energy and climate change and everything associated with it, environmental. This stuff can be really overwhelming. And a politician doesn't have, they don't have much time to do that kind of thinking or reading or analyzing. They really don't know what they're talking about. And they're assuming that the people who are feeding them information, who have their own agendas going, actually are telling them the truth.
Yeah, the kind of for me, and there are so many aspects of the Green New Deal, it's tough to respond to all of the individual bad ideas in it with a coherent and thoughtful response. But kind of the gist of the situation is that they're claiming that we're going to have these major issues within about a decade or so in terms of the climate. But the Green New Deal is also built on the premise that all of this massive shift is going to be good for our economy and overall living standards. And then they're also throwing in additional pieces that have nothing to do with the climate, such as if you want to work, basically, you can get work. There's kind of this almost universal work guarantee inherent in the Green New Deal. Remember, New Deal is that kind of project. So it's a very multifaceted, not really concentrated on any one specific idea, but the idea that 12 years, it's crisis, 10 years, whatever, and then we, at least throw all your resources towards that if you genuinely believe it. But even its internal logic falls apart, as I understand it. Would you agree with all that?
Yeah, the only point of disagreement I would tell you is that you said internal logic, and I think you've given them far too much credit. There really is no logic. This is just a crazy group. Throw in everything that any dictator would want. Anybody who is trying to quickly and radically change the United States of America into a socialist nation, just throw it all into one pot and we'll call it a Green New Deal. That's what it is. There is no logic. You can't defend. Almost anything that they've put in there is not defensible. It's not practical. It's impossible. And not only that, like one of the things that I talked about in my film Fractured was this problem that we have as a society when we talk about energy, where we don't talk about things in basic cost benefit terms. So if you're in business, anything that you look at, you're looking at a balance sheet. What's this going to cost us, and what are we going to get out of it? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? That basic part of running a business is not part of the energy discussion. So when people talk about let's take the energy source that people like to hate on the most, and take coal. Well, coal's dirty, puts pollutants in the atmosphere. Coal's bad. It's all negative. And so a lot of that's changed. Coal-fired power plants are significantly cleaner than they were 40 years ago. That doesn't mean that they don't put out some particulate matter, because they do, to what are now termed acceptable standards by our own Environmental Protection Agency. And these coal-fired power plants are far, far cleaner than what you're seeing being built, even the new ones in places like India and China. So this energy source, okay, what does this do for us? I mean, it's half of your electricity. Okay, I mean, every time you turn something on, that's coal. And then on top of that, coal is necessary to make steel because of the properties that enable it to burn at such a high intensity that you can take that iron ore and turn it into usable steel products. Well, that's what we use coal for. I mean, this is the upsides of coal are off the charts, and there are downsides, and we can talk very logically and reasonably about the downsides and stacking up the downsides against the upsides. And where I see it, I mean, on and then you start getting into oil, which is the upsides are I mean, there is no comparison. You're looking at something that's the upsides and the downsides of using oil. To me, it would be the upside is the top of the tallest building, and the downsides are, relatively speaking, are the size of maybe of a ream of paper. I mean, there's just no comparison. So we should be talking about upsides and downsides, and we don't.
No doubt about it. And another area of the Green New Deal that directly you put some New Mexico emphasis on in your video on the California rail fail. Now, of course, that's high-speed rail in California, which conveniently the state, very left-wing progressive Governor Gavin Newsom pulled the plug on within a week of the Green New Deal kind of being made public. So it's kind of illustrating the point about the unaffordability of what the Green New Deal purports to want to do, which is to essentially move us away from airplane travel to rail travel and have a massive new network of high-speed rail. But talk to us a little bit about rail in general. Why is it such a fetish for the left? And you can talk about the Rail Runner, our beloved, not so beloved project right here in New Mexico, and how it kind of fits in with all these other boondoggles.
Yeah, the mass transit in general, that's what the left is embraces, and they will tend to embrace rail travel because for some reason there's something about trains. I love trains. They're fun. And so you and people who live in in large really dense urban areas. If you've been on New York subway system, or I've ridden that. Well, I've ridden Tokyo. I'm all over the world and the United States, and it's kind of cool. And there's some places where you absolutely need them. So New York would be one of them. There's only a handful of places really around the world that I would say your rail systems are absolutely necessary. They're heavily subsidized, even so. But to try to connect a nation that was built around the car is ridiculous. And so I think they take the left takes the nostalgia of rail, and they wrap their sort of mass transit fantasies in that, and suggest that this is somehow some going to lead to some kind of utopia. But the numbers never work. This is a 19th century thing. If you have two giant urban centers and you're trying to whisk people between, say, Tokyo and Kyoto, been on that high-speed train, it's fabulous. It's massively subsidized by the people, and even though the significant price that you pay, it was expensive. I wrote it. It was many years ago. I wrote it, but it was very expensive, and then still it had to be massively subsidized. But even that situation, I can halfway see it, but the kind of thing like the California Rail project, they were going to move people from the San Diego to San Francisco. The numbers never worked, never came close to working on that. And they're going to go ahead and finish this one between Fresno and Merced, I guess it is, which nobody's going to ride this train. And this happens, Paul, over and over and over again. One of the first times we met, actually, was when I was making Spoiled, and you had Randall O'Toole,
Yep.
in town. He was giving a speech, and I interviewed him for Spoiled. And he wrote a fantastic book, Why We're Stuck in Traffic, or what was it called? That was the subtitle. But in any event, he documents very clearly how this happens over and over and over again. There was a big piece in this weekend's Wall Street Journal about a rail project in Hawaii, and how this thing the cost overruns are extreme, and it's a microcosm of what you would encounter with this Green New Deal, which is you have all of these factors they didn't consider. They rushed into it way too fast. It is double the cost, more than double the cost now. They've completely blown through the time frame of building it, and they're not going to have nearly enough people riding it to justify its existence.
Now
And this is, look, when
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. You ascribe a lot of the Green New Deal to being about control and socialism and whatnot. How much of the left's fetish for mass transit and trains replacing the automobile do you ascribe to desire for greater control? Because clearly you can control people on a train system, especially one that's owned by the government, a lot better than you can people who are driving out and around their own automobiles.
Right. This is their ultimate. This is what they always move toward. This is like their magnetic center, where everything they do is comes back to this, which is controlling individuals, creating the collective, having that supersede the individual. So that completely fits in with their desire, which is they want control. They don't want you, the peon, to be driving your car around point A to point B, where you want to go. They want to control that. And if they can control how you move, where you go, what you do, that is huge. If they can control your energy supply, be it getting in through, I mean, you can see this coming, getting into your thermostat, because we're moving into a time where all of our thermostats are going to be smart thermostats, where they can control your thermostat. They can tell you, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, this is what the left is all about, is control. And mass transit just fits into that. And projects like the New Mexico Rail Runner, which I dubbed the Rail Robber back when it was just an idea that Richardson had, and spoke out loudly, as did the Rio Grande Foundation, that this is really dumb, really unnecessary, and you're going to regret it. And of course, we could see that coming.
No doubt. Well, just a few minutes to go. Any final thoughts? Anything that we missed in the interview that you'd love to have people go check out, aside from subscribing at your YouTube channel to the videos?
Well, we also have, of course, just like everybody else, we have an Instagram page and Twitter and Facebook as well. I would say that, just as somebody who, I spent most of my life in New Mexico. So, and I've been gone now for getting close to a couple of years, and I miss it. I really love New Mexico. I like the weather is the best. I miss the sky. I miss the air. I miss the food. It really does have just. I so often I think about New Mexico, and I think about all the different. I'm thinking Albuquerque, but you've got the full state of New Mexico with all of the beauty from south to north, and my mind is still. I can't fathom why somebody would want to live in Phoenix as opposed to New Mexico, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, wherever, Las Cruces. Why would you want to live in Phoenix, where it's just so hot? And the answer is just opportunity. The opportunity's not there. The business climate is not what it should be. It all comes back to the political leadership. And I got to tell you, I got two children who went to the university. Both of them went to different colleges, but they ultimately got their degrees from the University of New Mexico, and both of them summa cum laude graduates. And I look around at my children and their friends, and both of my kids were heavily involved in athletics and cheerleading, and they're very social. So I saw a lot of kids, and what I have witnessed is within our group, I would say the most of the smartest kids, not all, there's a lot of smart kids who are staying in New Mexico, but I would say a majority, they've left. Well, my kids' group, they've left. They've left because the opportunities aren't there. Because the politics is so backward. And I see the fight that the Rio Grande Foundation is up against with these people. It's mind-boggling. This preposterous idea that New Mexico is going to have 100% of its electricity from wind and solar by 2045, that is beyond stupid. But yet they float it, they pass it. Okay, we wrote this down, on a paper, so it's going to happen. No, it's not. And you're going to drive up electricity prices significantly in a poor state where people can't afford it. What are you doing? So here it is. You've got this cool place that should be attracting lots of people, that should be highly dynamic, but it's not. All the states around it are thriving, and New Mexico is not. And you've got what you really need, the talent, the young talent, is leaving. It should be. It's frightening.
Well,
I'm just. Mm.
Thank you, Mark. That was incredible, very impassioned, and from someone who knows the reality of New Mexico, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much, folks. Go check out Mark's Clear Energy Alliance, clearenergyalliance.com. Some great videos available up there on their website, and of course, via YouTube. And Mark, you've got a little tab on your website about speaking. Just on the off chance that your plans do take you back to New Mexico at any time, I would be first in line to throw an event together for you and let you share some of your videos and thoughts on the situation in New Mexico, because, you know, an expert is forgotten in their own geographical area. It's only when you get on an airplane and come to the place that you're officially labeled an expert. Now that you've been away from New Mexico for a few years, we can claim that mantle of expertise for you and have you talk about and show maybe some of these videos as well.
I would love to do it. I would enjoy it, and we'll figure out a way to make it happen.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this week's discussion. We are working every day to turn New Mexico around. Go to RioGrandeFoundation.org for more information or to support our work.